The hallucination that prevented a tragedy. George W. had felt that something was wrong with him for months now. Not that he was physically ill, but rather he was afraid that something was happening to his mind. When he finally told Julie, his wife, she laughed and said, "You've been working too hard, George. The trouble with you is that you're just too darned conscientious. Now I'm not complaining because you put in so many hours at the shoe store. I know it's a responsibility managing a big place like that, but you don't have to work like a slave. Now come over here and stretch out on the sofa and tell me what's bothering you." "No," George protested. "I can't do that. You're liable to think I'm some kind of a nut." "Don't be silly," Julie insisted, her curiosity piqued. "I'm your wife, aren't I?" George looked at her and nodded. "Sure, but sometimes there are things a man has to keep to himself, even from his wife. Perhaps that's one of the reasons you're so upset. Maybe if you told me it'd help." Although he wanted to tell her, he found that he could not do so. The dream he kept having over and over had been getting worse lately. He was even having the dream while he was awake. Finally, unable any longer to carry the burden alone, he decided to tell his wife about the terrible constant nightmare. Julie was appalled by his story and begged him to see a psychiatrist. A few weeks later, George consented to make an appointment, but he kept putting it off because he thought the whole thing was foolish. This business of going to a man who just sat and listened to you talk and then decided from what you said that there was something wrong with your head. But then again, perhaps something was the matter and he had better try to do something about it. After the psychiatrist assured George that nothing he said would be repeated to his wife, George managed to relax somewhat and settled back in the armchair facing the doctor, surprised that there were no couches in evidence. "Now, George," the doctor said, "tell me your problem." George looked at the psychiatrist with a wary eye. "Suppose what I tell you is so wacky that you decide I'm really a nut, then what?" "First, let's find out what's bothering you," the doctor answered. "Well, it's kind of hard to explain. You see, a few months ago I started having this dream. It would be so terrible that I'd wake up and not be able to go back to sleep. I never could seem to get the point of it, though. At first, I couldn't even describe the thing I saw, but as time went on, I could see it clearly. A gigantic dragon. It is. Breathes out fire and smoke and chases me all over the place. I even quit smoking when I started to have the nightmare. It frightened me that much." "Go on. What else can you tell me about this dream?" "That's the strangest thing of all. Suddenly, I see myself being chased into a hospital. I'm in bed in a huge ward, with dozens of other beds up and down both aisles as far as the eye can see. Everybody there has cancer, in one form or another." "And what do you have?" the doctor inquired quietly, his eyes keen with interest. George shrugged, lifted his hands from the arms of the chair, and dropped them again. "I don't know what I have, doctor. That's the funny part. The dragon suddenly starts sneaking down the corridor between all the hospital beds. He comes over to where I'm lying and starts breathing smoke and fire at me. Then, while I'm waving away the smoke and trying not to choke, all of the other beds start to catch on fire and burn. Everyone in the ward is burning up but me. I start running again, away, and again the dragon chases me." George paused for breath, as if the telling of his nightmare had been a supreme effort that had sapped him of all his strength. "Well, doctor," George asked, smiling, "what's the verdict? Am I nuts, or am I nuts?" The psychiatrist did not think it amusing. He made several notes and asked without looking up, "You say you see this dragon chasing you in the daytime now, when you're not in bed asleep?" "Yes, sometimes when I'm on the bus going to work. Other times I can see the thing coming for me when I'm downtown waiting to cross the street. Once, I saw it coming toward me just when the light turned red. I dashed out into the street without thinking and nearly got killed by a speeding car. It sure would have chased me into a hospital then, wouldn't it?" Misery etched on his face, he added. "It's awful, doctor." "And every night you have the same dream?" "Yes, every time it starts the dragon chases me into the hospital." "Have you had a physical checkup lately?" "Yes, I was okay." "Were you at the cancer clinic? I mean, did you go through any tests there?" "I wasn't there." George eyed the doctor and grinned. "Don't tell me you think I've got this nightmare because I'm secretly afraid that maybe I've got cancer." The doctor looked at him quizzically. "Well, don't we all wonder about that at one point or another?" George got the point and slowly began to nod. That's a good idea, Doctor. Think. I'll do just that. Take some tests. Who knows? Maybe I have been worrying too much about cancer lately. With all the stuff in the papers, like you said, doesn't everybody? That night, for the first time in months, there was no nightmare. A few days later, feeling relaxed and at peace with the world, George engineered a sick leave and entered the hospital for a series of tests. After the tests had been completed, George said to his wife, who was visiting him, Gosh, hon, I haven't had that dream once since I saw the psychiatrist. You know, I should have listened to you long ago, but well, you know how it is. But Julie was not to know, and neither was George. After the motives for the nightmare had been explained away by logic and reason and psychology, by all the rules, George should not have had another hallucination about the fire-breathing dragon again. But he was to have another nightmare later that day, after his wife left him in his private room to go home. Shortly after dinner, the nurse came into George's room and said, If you're lonely in here, would you like to be moved into the ward? You'll have plenty of company, and it won't be so boring. George nodded sleepily. He had been up that morning before dawn, and now that the ordeal of the test was over, he felt emotionally drained and weary. Yes, he yawned. I'd like that. Very well, the nurse said. As soon as the orderly comes back on duty after his supper, I'll see that he moves you. George smiled, closed his eyes, and fell asleep. Although he didn't yet know the results of the test, it was a sound, peaceful sleep, completely free of tension and fear and anxiety. He was barely aware that he had been moved on a rolling stretcher to a ward, but his peace of mind was to be short-lived. All of a sudden, there was the nightmare all over again, but this time it was more real than ever. George woke up in darkness. The flames from the dragon could be seen lancing through the night at him. He felt himself swaying and choking as he jumped out of bed, his hospital gown trailing behind him as he ran toward the exit in the center wall of the huge ward. This time, however, he was actually living in a recreation of the hallucination. A fire had broken out in the ward. Terrified, he ran into the corridor towards the nurse's station, yelling at the top of his lungs. Bedlam broke loose. The hospital night staff appeared almost immediately with extinguishers. The ambulatory patients from the ward were pouring into the corridor, helping those who needed help, as great clouds of smoke rolled around them. Within moments, with everyone pitching in, the fire was brought under control. Miraculously, all the patients had been moved to safety. Later, George was to realize that the dragon dream was a precognition, a vision of the real-life nightmare to come. If he had not awakened when he did and given the alarm, most of the patients, asleep in their beds, would have perished, trapped as they were in the huge ward. The fire, which had been caused by one of the patients sneaking a smoke and falling asleep with a cigarette in his hand, would have spread like wildfire. George himself might have died in the fire had it not been for the vivid realism of the dragon. The next day, after the excitement died down, and the results of the series of tests were found to be negative, George returned home with a clean bill of health. Now only one thing remained for him to do. There was the appointment with the psychiatrist to be kept. When George excitedly told the doctor about the fire and pointed out the almost identical details of his dream, the doctor asked, And that was the last time you had the hallucination, the night of the fire? George laughed. That's right. I haven't seen the dragon since. I owe him a vote of thanks for saving my life. The doctor fell silent. After a while, he said, Surely now that you've come to realize that the cause of your hallucination was the anxiety and tension and fear you had built up worrying about whether or not you had cancer, you don't actually believe that the nightmare was extra sensory precognition, do you? The patient looked at his doctor and smiled. If it happened to you, doctor, wouldn't you believe it? The psychiatrist stood up and extended his hand in a friendly gesture of dismissal. George grasped it heartily. Finally, the doctor answered, Under those circumstances, perhaps I'd believe it too. Goodbye and good luck. And don't have any more hallucinations, will you?